We're here in Tulsa, Oklahoma today to interview Paul Andert, who is a World War II veteran that served under General Patton in World War II. And Paul, this is a real honor for me personally, and it's a unique opportunity, I think, to actually get a concise and thorough story, your life story, as well as your military story. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to start at the beginning, if you will, if that's okay. And I'm going to start by asking you, when were you born?
January the 2nd, 1923. The VA says it's 1922 because my mother changed my birth date so I could get in at 17. So I'm 1922 in the VA, but I'm 1923 actually.
Oh, okay. And speaking of your parents, why don't you give us a little background on, where you were born and where were you born?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay.
My mother was a World War I bride from France, and so my dad was in World War I, and he brought her. He married her. He went back and married her and brought her to the States, and we had 4 boys. And the 4 boys, well, 2 of us were born 7 years before the other 2 because my father was in the post office and after the war, and what he did, he went haywire afterwards, and he was gone for a while, and they couldn't find him and that, and so he came back, and they thought he'd be all right, and they they diagnosed that he had shell shock from World War I. So when he came back, he had the other 2 boys. There was 7 years between us, and at that time he took off again, and this time they put him in the Veterans Hospital, saying he had to be treated for shell shock. In those days, they treated him with shell shock, for shell shock. That's the only treatment they apparently knew, and actually in one of the treatments they killed him, and one of the shell shock treatments he had a heart failure, and he passed away. And so they've been doing it for about 7 years, every year before this happened, but he got him. And
Are you talking about shock treatment?
yeah.
Okay.
Shock treatment.
Yeah.
They gave him shock treatment for shock. That's
Yeah.
all they knew. They
Yeah.
said that we ought to be able to get him out of it with shock. But apparently they changed their mind afterwards. But anyhow, because there was 4 boys then, and 2 of us were 7 years older than the other 2, my mother was by herself from France and didn't know much English or anything, and so the Catholic Church took us over, put the 2 older boys in an orphan home, and the 2 younger boys stayed with Mom, and the church took care of her housing and their feeding and all that. And so what we did then is I went into the orphan home at 4 and a half and got out at 13, and my older brother and I both were in there. And one thing we did while we were there, we learned how to be people, how to grow up. And you learn how to grow up when you're in an orphan home, and you learn how to take care of yourself. And so I always thank the nuns for making a man out of me.
Were the nuns pretty strict? I mean,
very strict, and spare the rod and spoil the child, and they didn't spare the rod until we got to about the 6th or 7th grade, and we got a new priest who was running the place that he could take care of the nuns, and he said, you're changing all your attitudes now, and take the clubs away, and no more marching to eat, and you could talk all you want to in the cafeteria and all that. So anyway, I got out at 13, and I went home, and there was 4 boys at home then, and my mom was having a hard time with 4 of us, and so I went to a high school, and after 3 years in high school, I was expelled. They said I made faces at a teacher, and so they expelled me, and so what they did is they had me go to each teacher that I had and present them the fact that I was being expelled, and they were to write up what they thought about me. And so each one of them gave me a good write-up. And so they called a teacher in that accused me of making faces at her on another floor that I never was on. And the principal showed her the reports and that, and he says, you apparently made a mistake. Aren't you going to admit that you made a mistake? And the teacher says, unless I see his double in this school, I will never apologize to him. So she took off, and he says, I'm reinstating you. And I said, no, you're not. He says, why not? I said, because I quit. And he says, you quit? I said, yes. He says, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm 16 now, and I'll be 17 pretty soon, and as soon as I get old enough, I'm going in the Army. And so I went home and worked with my mom, and it was a very hard job because she was a house cleaner, a real good one. She had me go with her and help her clean houses, and so I was glad that when the time came, the war already started in Europe in '39, so I knew we would get into it. Mm-hmm. And so I went down to the recruiting office as soon as I was 17, and I said, I want to join the Army. And they said, you're too little, you're too young, we won't take you. And I said, I'm 18. And they said, well, we don't believe that. And I said, I am. So they gave me a paper, and they said, take this home to your mother and have her sign that you're 18, and we'll think about taking you. So I took it home. My mother said, well, soldier boy, how did you do? And I said, sign here and I'm in. And I knew she would because there was 4 boys at home and we're all raising hell. And she was having an awful time with us. So she was glad to get rid of one of us. So I went back the next day with the paper, and they said, well, we'll take you. And they said, but you have 3 choices: Coast Guard, Medical Corps, or infantry. I says, oh, Coast Guard, big guns, so I'll take Coast Guard. They said, you can't have it. I said, why can't I have it? They said, well, one of those guns went off and you're on the platform, you'd be blown away. So we couldn't find you, so you can't have that. So you got the Medical Corps or the infantry. And I said, I don't want to be a medic. So here I was, I got the infantry. And so that's how I got the infantry.
Paul, you had mentioned earlier that you were a small kid, kind of a short kid. How tall were you?
I was 5'7", 118 pounds.
When you went in the Army?
Yeah. And when I came out, I was 174 pounds,
oh.
5'8". But anyway, so they took me, and I had to take the infantry, and which was in a way was bad, but in another way was good because it taught me a whole lot of things in the infantry. And so I went to Fort Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, May 23rd, 1940, year and a half before Pearl Harbor. So they trained us in our own units, and we didn't have boot camp or anything in those days because the draft didn't take part until 1940 September, and I was in May. So I was considered regular Army. And so, and the regular Army, we only had 7 serial numbers, and the new Army all had 8. So we had 7 numbers. And so, anyway, at the original training, most of the guys in there were, some of them World War I, because 20 years has only been the difference. So they were all pretty old. They were old men, that's what they were.
Are you talking about the instructors?
Yeah, oh yeah, the instructors we had were I had a corporal that was in charge of me, and we called him Hogjaw, and he would march us up and down, and every time I got out of step, he'd kick me in the rear end, and he'd say, I want you out of this Army, you're just a runt. And I looked at him and I says, I got something to tell you. I grew up before I got here, so I'm going to be something, and you're not getting rid of me. So he had a bunch of guys put me in a trash can, a big trash can, 30-gallon, I guess it was, it had to be, and they locked me up, tied me down in a barrel, and rolled me down the company street in a cobblestone in those days, and the barrel goes like this and hits a tree, and the lid flew off, and I flew out, and so I jumped these guys. There were 3 of them, and I was just tearing them apart, and so they got to think, well, we might have killed him in that, you know, and so they treated me a little different after that because they found out that I would fight, and so anyway, we did Jefferson Barracks, and the only one thing I wanted to say about it, one thing I did learn to be mean because I was already taught that way, but one of the things that really got me was we had a prison camp where the Army guys who fouled up got put in a brig, and they had to serve time. So I was on honor of guard one day, and when you're on guard, you had to take the people out in different areas, take two prisoners you had to take, and clean certain areas and do this stuff like this and so forth. And so we had a shotgun with a bayonet welded on the end of it. And so they said, here's your weapon, and if they get away from you, you serve their time. And that was the rule then. And so I got, oh boy. So they give me these 2 guys, and they were pretty mean anyway, because I carried a Tommy gun most of the time. But we...
Can you tell us what a Tommy gun is?
Yeah, well, it's a machine gun. It's there's a lot of pictures of it around. I have it on my but it's people familiar with them. The gangsters used to always have them, but they had the round drum, and the round drum is too big and it's in the way, and you couldn't carry it. So for us, they changed it to a clip of 20 rounds, and we would carry 80 rounds. We would carry 1 in the thing and 3 on our belt, and so we'd have 80 rounds, and it was 45 caliber, of course. And if you, I shot a guy in the foot one time, and he flew through the air. But anyway, we getting into Kasserine Pass. Patton was sent up to. He was the 2nd Armored Division, but he was sent up to temporarily take charge of what was going on in Kasserine. And so he told us, he says, what you do, well, just before this happened, what happened is while we're up there, we take the high ground. The enemy knows the Geneva Convention. So they figured if we give up to them, they'll run out to get us. That's the rule. And so they would practice giving up to us, and then we'd run out to get them, and there'd be 3 of them. And when the guys got close to them, they'd hit the ground, and the guy in the center would have a machine gun strapped on his back, and they'd kill our guys for running out to pick them up. So we let the word out, don't give up to us, we're going to kill every one of you. We're going to kill you right off the bat, no questions asked. Since you are violating everything, we're going to kill you. So Patton says, that's what we need to do. And he says, you remember, the hell with the Geneva Convention, the person with the dirtiest plan wins. The person that makes the less mistakes wins. So you're going to make mistakes, but don't make as many as the enemy and you'll win. And that was his favorite saying there at Kasserine area there. And so after Kasserine, we cleared we were able to get through there, and then now the Germans and the Italians were coming from the desert. They were coming this way, and and there were some Germans here in the Kasserine area that already got there from Rommel's group, but Rommel wasn't with them. He got called back to the States, and to Germany, and because they didn't want him captured in Tunisia, and so our job then was to help take Tunisia and close the port to capture as many of them and get rid of as much of the Africa Corps as we could without them getting away and joining in Europe. And so,
Paul, up to that point, had you been in quite a few gunfights?
oh yeah, I had, and but the worst fight I got into was we were assigned temporarily to the 6th Infantry, which was my old outfit, and he says, I want you to send a patrol out, a reconnaissance patrol, no firing in other words, and find out what's going on up there, whether the Germans and the Italians are both there, who's taking over who, and get back at a certain time and report. So I'm looking at this thing and heading back to the platoon and say we're going to take a patrol out, so I would pick 4 men. And I knew this patent says you can't push spaghetti, you got to pull it. So I've got to pull the spaghetti, so I'll have to lead the patrol. So I took the 3 other guys and me, and we went on this patrol. We got all the way through to the enemy line, and we could tell by what was going on that the Italians were relieving the Germans. The Germans were being relieved, and so we got what we needed to know. We had to get back, and we're running out of time. And so on the way back, there was the German patrols had not been. The outposts had not been relieved yet, because the Italians were just coming in. So we had to get rid of the outposts. So we had to do it with a trench knife, because no firing or anything to wake up anybody. So my Sergeant Cermak took 1 guy, and I took the other guy. There was 2 of them on the boat, and went up behind him and did like we were taught: get him by the mouth and pull him back and get him under the ribs and run the knife all the way across, and it would kill him instantly. It said, and so it did, and we got him out. And after, I'm looking at the trench knife and realizing that just before that, they had us turn in all the, found out about that. And he says, I don't want the people in the United States to be notified about this until October. He says, because we don't know how they're going to take this, that we shot down all of us, But it's war, and we call it all killed in action. And there was no friendly fire or stuff like that. Killed in action. And so that was probably the worst thing that I could recall in Sicily, other than we took the town of Butera, because again it was the high ground. They could see 7 miles out to sea. See our ships out there and all that, so we had to take that ground. So we're taking the high ground with Darby's Rangers. Darby's Rangers were brand new, he's just training them, and he got killed right after that, Darby did. But anyway, my battalion and Darby's Rangers are climbing the mountain of Butera. And he wasn't mountain climbers and we weren't mountain climbers, but we hanging on and climbing it. And then our Navy firing these big shells across. When these shells would come across, we call them boxcars, these big shells, and they'd shake the whole mountain. And so we'd be holding on, cussing, and we had a little chaplain with us, a Baptist chaplain, Chun, and he'd holler, now boys, because we were cussing. And one of the guys says, now boys, hell, chaplain. He says, when we die, and we go up to St. Peter's, he's going to say, where did you serve? And we're going to tell him the infantry, and he's going to say, pass on through, you served your time in hell already. Yeah. So we always remember that. We took the town, and a German outfit was occupying one of the churches, and they told us they were in there. The people in Sicily were very friendly, of course. most of them had relatives in the United States. But anyway, we had to go into church, and they started firing us from one of the altars in the church, and so we had to fire back. We made a mess out of that church and killed all the guys that were doing it. And then as we left the church, we're going out to the other edge of town to see what was going on, and there was an Italian officer with a battery of artillery, horse-drawn artillery, and he motioned us to come over there. We had 7 or 8 lieutenants over the war, but this one lieutenant, he get drunk, and the company commander, we're moving up on this past these strong points, and the company commander come up one time and he says, "Where's well, his name was Zabatka. He's gone a long time ago. But anyway, he says, "Where's Zabatka?" I says, "I don't know." He says, "The hell you don't." He says, "You left him in a ditch back there." He says, "And he's your officer." He says, "You go back and get him." And I says, "He's drunk all the time." He says, "I don't care. Go back and get that drunk officer and have him with you." So I had to go back, and we had to go back and get him. I sent somebody back, but and then we went on to Palermo, and we took the town of Palermo because we wanted that port for the invasion of Italy, but we didn't need it. We took Messina, and Messina was closer, and so we didn't have to have it. But we took it first for that reason, to preserve the port. We did not want them tearing up the port. So we took it for that reason. And
Paul, in every war, there have been camp followers that followed the troops, or when you'd get into a town,
Yeah.
ladies that wanted to offer comfort to the GIs. Did you ever? I mean, was that happening in the area that you were at? I mean, was that a common thing?
It didn't in Africa because we're too busy. I thought of something that I've never told my wife this or any lady this. When I was in Oran, North Africa, I was in charge of a whorehouse. And my job was to make sure that every man took the I forgot what they called it.
Condom?
Well, the condom, but the shot that they gave you.
Oh, yeah.
You had to have it or you didn't get to leave it, and it was called Shanker Alley. You get shot. So I had to make sure. I never told nobody. I don't tell women that one. But anyway, that was a short period that I did that. But because the trouble I had, I was regular Army. And when they look for somebody to take over something, they look at it and they say, "Well, he's this guy's regular Army. We take him." And I'd say, and then my name began with A. And they always had that trouble. They looked alphabetically. A. You do that. You had to be the guide. You had to be that. All of that stuff. And so that's the way that came about. But anyway, in Sicily, after it died down a bit, I was standing on the running board and it blew me away. And after I recovered, I came back and leaned down by the truck, and I got a picture in my book of me leaning, brought in them people with mine detectors and everything, and we found the whole minefield we were in. But anyway, so then they had us turn in all of the equipment, and we didn't know what was happening then, and that's when they gave it all to the French 2nd Armored Division and General Leclerc, and so we wonder what's going to happen.
When you say they gave him your equipment, are we talking tanks?
We're talking about everything we had. Yes, they gave it to the French, and the reason for it is, I'll get to that, because they were giving us all new tanks, and what they did is have us turn in everything, and then they put us on ships. I remember it was the Harry Gibson they put us on, and took us out through the Mediterranean, through Malta, and then on up we were heading towards the United States for 3 days, and we say we can't be going home already because it's a duration plus 6 months. And so anyway, suddenly we turned north, and they said, you're right, you're going to the United, all right, but it's the United Kingdom, not the United States. And so that's where we were headed. And you won't advertise who you are or anything, because we want certain units that are going from Sicily to Normandy to be part of the Normandy invasion. We don't want them to know what experienced troops are going to be there. And so they call us then the Galloping Ghost, and they didn't report that we were in Normandy until October 44, and we were there from June to 6, 44. But anyway, that's where we went, and we got to England, of course, and we got to England in Thanksgiving time, and I always appreciated what the British did, because they were on rations, like 2 eggs a week, and they were very much limited. And for food, they fed us real good. They gave up their food for us, and because they knew we were there to fight, and they wanted us well fed. But they made a rule. They had a big.
Paul, when I came here this morning and I came up to your room, I noticed there was a couple of little figures outside your door. One was a rabbit and one was a duck. And I was trying to figure out, what is that all about?
Yeah, well, we'll get to the rabbit and the duck in a little bit. It's part of the story.
Okay.
I'll cover that. And where we were getting into England now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
And when we went to England, we went up through the North Sea and came all the way down. They wanted to make it look like we were coming from Iceland or someplace like that, which some of the American troops were there. And so we had to go all the way up to the top of the Irish Sea and then come on down to England. And when we landed there, we were not supposed to let anybody know where we came from. So most of the guys on the dock thought we would come from the U.S. And they were saying, well, what took you so long to get here? So some of our guys, violating what we were supposed to do, start throwing some of the African money out and stuff like that to let them know that we've been, And so they put us in a rail car and in the rail car, each compartment, they have compartments over there. There's about 6 people in a compartment, and Churchill would had a little note to us in there welcoming us to England and so forth, because he knew our story. Mm-hmm. And so we liked that. And then we went on to Tidworth Garrison. Well, they're not going to win that one because there's a blackout outside, so we all went outside. That's fine. As soon as we got all out in the dark, somebody hollered, "Take off," and everybody took off in a different direction. And I run into a tree, and they had them this wire around protecting the tree, and I got my face in the tree and messed my face up. But anyway, I had to go to the aid station and get treated, and some English guy that got the highest British award during World War I befriended us, and he says, "I'm going to take you to a part of London where there are no Americans and you'll be treated great." And so he took us to what they call Tottingham, London N9, and he took us there. And we were the only Americans there. And so it was a mess sergeant, and I always traveled with the mess sergeant because I wanted to give on food. And so we met a woman, Trixie Hopkins. She was an entertainer, and she had a daughter, Irene, and they call her Reenie. And so the mess sergeant was older than me. He went with the mother, and I went with the daughter. And so the only thing about the daughter, her mother would insist that she remains a virgin until she gets married. So I couldn't fool with her except be friendly. You know? But he got to have fun. But anyway, we'd be at different air raids. We'd go down in the subway, you know, in the tube, and the beds would be all lined up around the walls. You know, people slept down there in the subways during the air raids and all that, and so we'd go down there during some of the air raids, and we'd go over to the north end of London, and I can remember, the one thing I remember about it so much is that one of the air raids, we were back at camp at our place, and we got a message from the Trixie, the Hopkins, the mother, that the area that we were visiting, N9 got bombed, and it was really tore up, and they were bombed out of their home and all that, and so we went to the Red Cross, and each one of us borrowed, I think it was $30 a piece. It was quite a bit at that time, and took it with us to London to help them get another place and all this stuff. And of course, the government furnished a place and all that. And so the new thing, houses they gave them had metal tables, steel tables for to eat off of, and under the table would be cot and a mattress for the people during an air raid. If they couldn't get to a shelter, they get underneath the steel table in the bed. So the mother and the daughter went there in an air raid. We went upstairs and slept in their beds and during the air raids. But anyway, we had things over the top. If you ever looked at any of the pictures, you could see it. And it come up like this and went like this, and so that if it would protect the engine. And, and you have to take that off in order to get it to operate properly. And so see the LSTs, the temporary docks that Churchill had made, were brought in so that they could use the LSTs and dock them there, because the Germans had gotten rid of all the docks, of course, and so he had to have those made, those extra docks. And so they came in on the 9th, and we went in on the 6th and 7th, the morning of the 7th. And so by the 9th, we had the bivouac area placed for them, what they should do and so forth, and landing on out easier. Well, when we got past a lot of the fighting area, the guys, some of them straightened the pins back out, most of them didn't. And our lieutenant that was with us at that time, we went into this area that we picked, and he went over by a tree and he sat down by it and he slid down the tree, and he had the grenades in his pouch in the back, and we heard one of them go pop. And we all had to drop to the ground. There's no way we could help him. 7 seconds we knew he was dead, and it blew his rear end off and everything else, you know, and it just got him. And I never forget that, seeing him sitting there knowing that he knew he was done, and we knew he was done, and there's nothing we could do about it. So anyway, we did get up to the Wire River. We did relieve them, and that's something that a lot of the paratroopers that talked about it in a Band of Brothers later said that the real Band of Brothers, the guys that you could talk to, that you met them there at the Wire River, they said, we remember your outfit because you were incognito, but you still had the 2nd Armored Division patches on, and we remember the 2nd Armored Division gave us the ammunition and the stuff to carry on. And the 2nd Armored Division is, the Band of Brothers are the ones that commented on the movie Band of Brothers. They got the Academy Award for it. But the guys that were actually there wrote letters afterwards to Hollywood telling them, you didn't tell the truth. We couldn't fire that once because we didn't have the ammunition. And Hollywood says, well, we darn sure didn't tell the people that because we won the Oscar for what we did in the film. So we couldn't tell them that the guys wrote us and said we were wrong. And that's you know, that, and just shoot them as they come through. We had a squad up at the back that would chase them back down and shoot them when they come down. And so I got a new lieutenant that day. And he come up there and he got in the hole with me when they went through, and that was fine. Then when they were coming down, he got out of the hole, and I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Don't get out of that hole." He says, "I'm going to meet those guys." And so he decided to start fighting with some of those guys when they come down. And he got a little knee mortar shell, hit him on top of his helmet and drove it down past his eyes. He couldn't see, and he got knocked out. I put him in a hole. He was in the war like one day, and he got evacuated because he was stupid, you know, lieutenant. And so anyway, we did chase him out of there. And the 4th of July came, and I was sitting in the hole, and I'm writing a letter to my mom. Everything's fine. Hope you're fine, like we always did. And I remember it was the 4th because we were going to serenade the Germans. By serenade, they mean all artillery pieces were going to fire in conjunction. Serenade, just shell them with the fire. And so they were doing it. The British, he wasn't there with Eisenhower because Eisenhower didn't come over on D-Day. He was with General Bradley, I guess it would have been, and because he was in charge of that particular deal. And so anyway, we got strafed one time and by a British aircraft, and one of them died right on my half track, and my driver is this close to me, and I'm standing up, and he's sitting down, and one of the bullets from the plane got him, killed him, and here I am standing there. It could have gotten me very easily, but because I wasn't using my anti-aircraft, my 57 against him, I wouldn't do it. It was a friendly plane, but we kept putting orange flags out and waving our arms. We're friendly. And the second plane that came, he'd start going like this. He recognized us. That meant recognition. So they stopped firing on us. But anyway, we took them in on foot because our gun is back there, and we can't pull it because our half tracks are in a safe area. And so, because they're only 1/4-inch steel. And so anyway, I told everybody, get out of here, take off and meet back at the track. And so everybody except me, because I was against the wall and I didn't notice it until I was going to get out myself, and I'm going like this, and it's a wall, and the tank is coming, and I knew the first thing that happened when the tank gets around the corner, he fires his gun to clear the street. So I knew that, and so I'm saying, oh my God. So I'm hanging like this and saying, Lord help me, and whatever else is here, help me. But the tank comes around the corner and he fires, and I'm holding like this, and the blast comes right this way, lifts me up on top of the wall and drops me down on the other side. And my pants legs were torn. I had a piece of stuff in here, and then I had a piece in here, and I went down on the other side, and I had to crawl. I couldn't walk no more. So I crawled over to the half tracks, and we got our wire off and our mines and stuff we had, and we planted mines on the side roads, so they have to stick to the main road. Because I knew we had our artillery outfit, the mounted artillery, with the 105s, we had upgraded. Anyway, they sent me to 2 psychiatrists. One says, you're crazy, and I said, no, I'm not. So he sent me to another psychiatrist. And he says, well, I don't think you're crazy, but I'm going to do you a favor. And I said, what's that? He says, you've been in 3 invasions. I'm going to send you home. I said, no, you're not. He says, what? I said, you're not sending me home. He says, why not? I said, because my guys are up there. I trained with them. They're my men. I'm not going to go home, listen to the radio and wonder what happened to them. So I said, I'm going back. He said, you really are crazy, and I'm going to see that you do go back. And so I got back. But anyway, that was that's what happened on that one. But anyway, we went through Belgium, Holland, and up into Germany, and so anyway, we went around Paris. We didn't go into Paris. They let the General Leclerc and de Gaulle, his bunch, go into Paris, and some of the 4th Division went in there, infantry division, marched, but they didn't do the French civilians and the French deal there, and
that would have been like shooting fish in a barrel.
yeah, yeah, and so anyway, we had had the tanks lined up, and then the infantry would be dug in behind them, and we had to stay there a while because of 16 days of rain and artillery fire. So we stayed there like that, and during that time, they said, let's put somebody out in no man's land and put some plant some tripper mines and stuff like that.
Booby traps?
Booby traps, yeah. And so, again, pull the spaghetti instead of pushing it. So I said, I'll do it. And so I got my radio operator, and we went together, and we were out there, and we heard noise out there, and we knew it was a German patrol, so we kept real quiet. It was a cabbage patch, and they were sliding on the cabbage, and they were cussing. And so we waited till they got out of the sight and so forth, and so I said, let's go ahead and put a few more traps out and get out of here. When I said that, I turned around, and my radio operator was gone. He took off, and I was by myself. So that was by myself in no man's land, against Patton's orders, you know, against any order. And so I'm saying, well, I'll plant a couple more. I put 2 more out, and I said, what the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to stay out here by yourself. So I decided, well, I'll go back. I'll get out of here. Another mistake I made. You always go back out the same place you went in. I went straight back. Some of the tanks sitting up there heard noise out there, so they started firing. They're firing in my direction, but they couldn't. They just knew there was somebody out there. They heard me, and so I started hollering, "Cease fire! Cease fire!" In no man's land, I'm hollering, "Cease fire!" And so I finally get up there to the tanks, and one of the tankers come out there and said, "What the hell are you doing out here?" I says, "They didn't tell you I was out here?" And he says, "No, nobody did. They're supposed to pass the word on down. There's friendly troop out there, but they didn't." And so the word didn't come out. So I went back to my company commander to talk about the next drive we were going to take to the Roar River. So I go back to the tank, and I said, well, this is sauerkraut, and this is Lieutenant Woodbury's blood. I says, that's what that all is. And then he says, somebody get this man a clean jacket. So I got a clean jacket out of that one. We wore 2 jackets in those days. The jacket underneath had the stripes on it so the enemy wouldn't know. And the other one above had no stripes. And so I put on the jacket, and that gave me 8 big pockets, 4 on each jacket. On the way back, they decided to bring the kitchen up. They put the 84th, the brand new division, in there to hold the line while we recouped to move to the Roar River. Now, all this food is sitting here. Knockwurst weenies, big knockwurst weenies. And so I'm smelling those things, oh great, we all get in the chow line, and somebody hollered, incoming. Everybody runs to the holes. I stood there, and I'm looking at the weenies, and I said, I'll be damned if I'm going to go to the hole. I'm going to get the wieners. So eight pockets of big wieners. I shoved them in all 8 pockets, big wieners. And so the artillery went beyond us, and so afterwards they say, all clear. So the guys got back in the line, and they say, well, where are the wieners? And the mess sergeant says, he got them. I says, you ran to the holes, I ran to the wieners. So I shared them with some of them afterwards, but we water them off, and and that, And so in the meantime, I got a new lieutenant, another new lieutenant, and he had cavalry boots on and cavalry breeches. And he come up there, and as long as the light on the tail is lit, you're all right. But if the light goes out, it's coming down. So as long as I could see the lights, I was all right. Tied down to a stretcher, and 2 enemies were supposed to be carrying me into the warehouse to be taken care of. They dropped me on the sidewalk and running in, and left me laying there looking up. But anyway, when it was buzz bomb let up a little bit, they picked me up and took me into the and I told them both, and I don't know, they didn't understand me, of course. I said, I'd kill both of you if I had a weapon. But anyway, when I got in there, they said, you're going to England. And I said, I just got a flesh wound. I had this flesh wound here. And I said, I can heal here. I said, no, you're going to England. So I was tied down. They put me in a stretcher. There was about 5 of us in the airplane, C-47. So, okay, we fly to England. We hit some guide wires, crash the plane in England in an emergency airfield, and run by British aircraft ladies, ATS. And so they come out and get us out of the plane, and the pilot come back there and he said, sorry to give you a rough ride, but these 47s could take a lot of beating, and he came in pretty good on his nose and did all right. And so they took us to the aid station, and it was one of the best. Let me show you what to do with that potato. And I said, how many numbers in your serial number? He said 8. I said, only 7 in mine. Take this potato and shove it, you know, where you can. And he says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going AWOL. And he says, you'll be in trouble. You go AWOL, they'll put you on for. I said, I'm going AWOL. So I went AWOL from there. And of course, Colonel Lee put me on report and put me to be court-martialed for deserting the what's-call-it. So I went down to the port of England, one of the ports there, and I met a captain that had a group of new guys going over, a new company of infantry, and he took to me real good because I told him what I was doing, trying to get back to my outfit. So he says, come with me, and another ship picked us up, and they were dangerous for them to do it because they used searchlights, and English planes, I mean German boats were in there to try to get us, but they used a searchlight to get us. And we had to climb up a rope ladder to get up to the other ship, and I'm climbing up the rope ladder only get halfway because my leg was still bad. So I'm hanging there, and one of the guys going past me, I said, have them send somebody down to help me. So a sailor come down and help me, and they helped me up there. When I got up on deck, that officer said, I didn't do you a favor. And I said, what? He said, if you would have drowned out there, you would have been a deserter of the American Army, and you would have been recognized in the United States as a deserter. And I said, well, I never thought of that. He says, I know you didn't. He said, but that was dangerous. I said, I should have never taken you with me. But of course, he didn't know the ship was going to get sunk.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got on shore, and then I took the Red Ball Highway, and the guys that carrying stuff up to the front to get up to my outfit, and their rule was they could take anybody up but bring nobody back. You could take, people want to go up, that's fine, but you can't bring anybody back. So I got up to my outfit the 22nd of December.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, we were tanks, German tanks firing against it. We were right in the middle of them, we had to be. And what we did is we would help them hunt the targets, and we got help from British Typhoons aircraft that was across the river, and General Hines didn't have communication with the British aircraft, so he sent a Piper Cub over there to bring the British Typhoons over, and they helped us by strafing the second division, the Panzer Division tanks. There was 2 brigades of them, and we got a big write-up in our book of how many German tanks we knocked out and all that, but a lot of the credit has to go to the British Typhoons, who did a hell of a lot helping us. And, so anyway, that was that, and so we went through the well, the Battle of Bulge, what helped a lot, this one book here, this book here, I got from a German officer earlier in the war, and I tried to carry that in my half-track with me all the time. And during the Battle of Bulge, I had this with me, and because they were faking they were playing like they were Americans, the Germans were, and so they would wear white, and if you tried to do anything, they could fire on you and kill you. So what I did, in their manual, it shows them how the Americans hit the ground, but with the 03 rifle, not the M1. M1, you went down on 2 knees. 03, you went on 1 knee because you had to have the bolt.
Mm-hmm.
So, way I told the guys, if you see anybody out there and you don't know who they are, fire over their heads, see how they hit the ground. If they hit the ground with 1 leg, kill them. If they hit the ground with 2 legs, they're American.
Unbelievable.
So that's how this book was used by me.
My, oh my.
It's got a picture of Hitler in there and so forth, and it's somebody told me that's worth a couple $1,000.
I can imagine.
And but it's coming apart. But anyway, that's that. And of course during that time I was able to collect a lot of the different German insignia that the Italian and the German, and then the different insignias of the Germans. That the waving wing was Air Force, straight wing was Ground Forces.
Mm.
A helmet badge, a field officer, line officer, a German decoration, Air Force German reservation. This one of these was given to German girls, ladies who had children for Germans, that they would turn the kids over at 12 years old to Hitler, and he put them in the Hitler Youth to train them to be mean too. And we fought a lot of Hitler Youth too. And so anyway, that was that. And after the Roar River, I mean after the deal there at Battle of Bulge, we moved back then towards the Roar River to take Lennox on the Roar River. Birds, elephants, whatever there was in the zoo was running the town, and lions, and they were trying to find out who did that, and they wouldn't tell on me. General Hines knew, but he wouldn't, say that he had anything to do with it. And so anyway, and incidentally, General Hines is from close to St. Louis there, from a town there. I forgot, Nashville or something like that's the name of the town. But anyway, we were able to do the Cologne deal and all of that, and then move on towards the Elbe River. And 45 right here. She pulled the 45 out of her holster and shot him. And we knew right then that's going to be war. And of course she was shot right away. The mayor of the town told her she was just getting even for one of the guys, her brother or something, you killed. While that was going on, a guy was backing up to my half track, and I'm hollering, "Halt, halt," and he wouldn't stop. So I had nothing to do, I had to shoot him. So I shot him, and he fell down, and he had a Panzerfaust holding it like this. He was ready to lay that Panzerfaust in my half track, kill all of us. And so I killed him. And the mayor of the town says he was a Hitler Youth and he was terrorizing the whole town. It was a good thing you did it, But so we did go on through the town. But you have to, we had to play each town separately according to what they agreed they would do. Mm-hmm. In some of the towns, when the mayor came out and he'd give up to us and he'd go back, the SS, if they were in the town, they would hang him in there. And we'd find him hanging his office, hanging for trying to help us, for trying to help the town, trying to save his town, they'd hang him. And so that was that. And so anyway, that's when we came across. I told you the story about the guy that set the barn on fire, and that's when we ran into that. And the people wanted him real bad, and so we gave it to him, and he took care of it. And so anyway, when we on the way, are we running out of time? One of the cities that we came across during our breakthrough troops, we were always told that when you're hit a town, if you see a fire, go to the fire. And what it was is SS troops that were evacuating people from us to get them away from us relieving them, political prisoners and Jewish prisoners. They would put them in a barn with animals, lock the barn up and set it on fire, and leave the people there. And our job was to get to the fire drunk, and we would see what they would do. And the duck would slide on his bill and get up and quack quack and slide on his bill again. And so the rabbit would just sit there and shake his head, and his ears would just flop around. And so what happened there then, we had the duck and the rabbit with us at this town, and some of the Jewish people, the skeletons, had gotten hold of the rabbit, and they started to tear him apart to eat him raw. And of course we had to stop them, but they'd already killed him. But a lot of people always ask me, well, what happened to the duck? And I says, I guess he got away. I hope he did anyway, because we never saw the duck after that. But anyway, that was the story of the rabbit and the duck. There's a lot of bring it up and cook it for her if she was there. If she wasn't there, we'd go down and get the food and cook it. But anyway, in this one house, they had a cuckoo clock on the wall. And the cuckoo, you know, comes out every half hour. So while we're sitting there, one guy is cussing, and he's looking at the cuckoo, and I'll tell everybody, be real quiet, let's watch and see what he does. And he's itching over towards the clock. Finally, he gets to the clock, and the cuckoo comes out. He grabs the cuckoo, he pulls it out of the clock, and he throws it on the floor, and he shoots it. And he says, damn Nazi bird. And the kids all get a big laugh out of that. And we often wondered, what did those people think when they got back to their house and their bird was on the floor, shot up, the cuckoo bird. And then the other one was, well, I told you, born, and he wanted to give up, he told them, and be sent to the United States and be treated according to the Geneva Convention. So we went into Bourne and got him out. And he came out and he says, I am a colonel in the SS and be demanded to be treated according to the Geneva Convention. A guy next to me, private first class Archer, he hit that colonel in the mouth and knocked him on the ground. And he leaned over and he says, you might be a colonel in the SS, but I'm just a PFC in the American Army, and you're going to do what we tell you. And so the people in the meantime were begging me, give him to us, because of what he had done. Because some of the people he put in the barn, set it on fire, were some of their people who disagreed with what he was doing. And he put them in their barn with him and set him on fire. So they wanted him. So I said, take him. So they took him. And they filled him with bullet holes, stripped him naked, and laid him on the side of the road. As we marched out of there the next morning, there he was laying there, and I could remember saying, the best thing that ever happened is what happened to that guy, because he was a criminal. He was not a colonel in the SS, he was a criminal. And so they did it, and we were glad they did it. I've been told by some people that I should have never done that to a colonel, but I did, and I'm proud of it. But nevertheless, that happened there, and so we knew one thing without me even telling anybody. Everybody rushed those places, and they divided up. I didn't have to say anything. They divided up, so many took this placement, so many took that placement, and we got them all, we killed them all before they could lower the stuff. The colonel that was in charge of the German airfield came out, and he told me, he says, I know that you guys are on a breakthrough, you're causing all kinds of trouble, we've heard about you. He says, and we know that the others are following you, and he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. I give you my honor that I give up, and I will turn myself in and my group in to the people that are following you. He says, do you honor that? And I says, I honor you. I honor what you said, because I believed him. And he gave up, and so we went across the Elbe River, and got chased back across because we couldn't get any tanks across. The first German jets showed up, and they were bombing the bridges and that, and blowing up the bridges. I knew the colonel, so he's sitting there, and Stryker was his name, and the colonel says, I'm ashamed of you. And I says, what are you ashamed of? I says, you ran. He says, you ran. I says, Colonel, you ran first. I says, you're a colonel, I'm a sergeant. I says, what are you talking about? And of course I knew him when he was a lieutenant, so I knew him pretty well. And so his staff is sitting behind me going like this, you know, they agree with me. And the captain looked at me and he says, I'm surprised you got away with that. And I said, that's because I know him. But so he says, we'll stay on this side of the river. Your battalion, you move up, my battalion, his battalion, move up that side of the enemy side of the Elbe River. Try to find a new crossing. Not a new crossing, but where you could get in further. And so we're moving there. And this Captain Stryker, that's brand new, he's just with me in short time. We're moving up, and we get, so again, pull the spaghetti. So I stayed there with 2 machine guns, 3 guys with their machine gun, light machine guns, and said, we'll protect while those guys go over. So everybody got across, and that was April the 12th, Roosevelt's birthday. And so Roosevelt, some guys got drunk on Roosevelt's birthday. We didn't get drunk, we were too busy. But anyway, we're right at the point where we got to go back across, okay? And so we caught some prisoners, so I have some prisoners. So now what am I going to do with the prisoners? And somebody said, you should have put them in the water with you and have them swim. I said, what? There was more prisoners than there was of us. There was only 4 of us. Yeah, they would have drowned us, you know? And so what did you do? I said, I did what Patton said. Take off their shoes, tell them to run, and shoot them. So I said, tell them to take off their shoes and run, and we shot them. And I said, I don't know how many we killed, and I couldn't remember how many there was. It seemed to me like there was 12, but I got it in the book, but I forgot the numbers. But anyway, we shot them, and so I got across. We got on the field artillery, the Hellenbrode Forest, and there was a group of enemy in there that wouldn't give up. So we had to go. We were ordered to go in and get them out.
Yeah.
So we went in to get them out. The first enemy I ran across, I shot him and his helmet rolled off, and I said, that's my helmet. I always wanted a German helmet, and this war's almost over. I'm going to get that helmet. So I grabbed that helmet and strapped it on my belt, and went a little further, and there was Selmas McRae, one of my squad leaders, laying there, and they'd covered him up, but I could just see his feet. And he was the left-handed pitcher on my ball team in peacetime. And I says, that's McRae. And they said, yes, it is. And I says, what happened? And they said, he's doing like he always did. He was the 3rd squad leader, and he would get drunk in a battle, and he would stand up on the back of the tank and he'd holler, I drink when I'm hungry and I drink when I'm dry. And if a tree don't fall on me, I'll live till I die. And they said that's what he was singing when he got hit right between the eyes. And the last battle of the war, he got killed. And so we went on, and the peace was declared on May 9th, and so it was peacetime.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Was there a time during the war that you got wounded? How many times did you get wounded?
Twice.
Did they ever send you home?
They tried twice, but I wouldn't go.
Did you ever?
No,
Oh,
we
okay.
never went home. I wouldn't go either
Okay.
time. I went AWOL back to my outfit one time, and the other time I told them I wanted to go back, and they sent me back. So that's the way that went. And
How many times, because of your experience, how many times did the Army come to you and say, we want to give you a direct commission? We need you in leadership. We need you in office.
I would
as an
say
officer.
probably about 4 times. But you see, you didn't do that, and the reason you didn't take
Yeah.
anything except with your men, and you stayed with your men, and so that's the way I felt about it, and that's the way I did it, and I never was ashamed that I did it or regretted that I did it, because I didn't want to be an officer anyway, because
They didn't last very long over there, it sounds like to me.
if they were in the infantry, they didn't last long. They either run away, got sick, or got shot. Only a few of them got shot, though, because a lot of them found a way of getting out and get sick or something, you know. And
What is the story about? He was in a hospital gown.
He covered that earlier when he went AWOL to go back.
Oh, okay.
They thought he was communist.
Okay. You already told that story.
okay, all right. But anyway, they wanted to know what I wanted to do, take a commission and go to Japan, prepare for Japan, or what did I want to do? I said, I got 132 points, I want to get out of the Army and go home. And they said, okay, because it was, at that time, as soon as the war was over in Europe, if you had enough points for 6 months overseas, and I was 30 months overseas, you got so many points for each decoration, depending on the type of decoration, how many points there was. You got a point for wounds, you got points for years in the service, points for the campaigns that you were in. I was in 7 campaigns and 3 invasions. So all of those points added up to 132. So they said, okay. So I got on a Hawaiian luxury liner, the Mariposa, and they sent us home on the Mariposa. And I remember I always wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, and damn it, they brought us into Boston Harbor. They didn't bring us into the Statue of Liberty. I saw the Statue of Liberty much later, but I always wanted to see it, but I didn't.
On that luxury liner, though, did you drink a lot of those drinks with umbrellas?
No, we didn't get any of those. What we did, we got a lot of the guys had cognac and wine that they were bringing, and there was a lot of gambling going on. And I never gambled, but I always bet on the side. Bet on the side what this guy could do, what that guy could do, and because I wasn't that good at gambling, but we did that. And and then of course I got out of the Army, and before Pearl Harbor, before the war was over in Japan, I was already home, because it got over in August and I got home in July. In June, and it was over in August. So that was I can remember they were still having war bond drives, and they would, at the bank at the corner, they would have machine guns, and I would walk with my mom uptown to the store, and they'd start firing machine guns, and I'd hit the street, and people say, "Who's that crazy guy? He's laying on his gun." Every time the machine gun went off, I would duck her.
What about, now, when I see these movies about the guys coming home from World War II, there were tremendous parades and there were tremendous ticker tape.
I'm glad you said that.
People were throwing stuff out of the windows, and these heroes.
All those parades were replacements. The what we see when the Second Armored Division went into Berlin, all the guys that had the points were already out. And then the replacements. And I often thought about that. And the only the thing I'd like to mention is the during the we haven't mentioned this Dynamite Dean during the he was wounded in I thought he was killed in the Siegfried line, and I made him his squad leader was killed, so he was a senior guy at the time, and I said, you're the squad leader, and he said, I don't want to be, and he says, I'm just a private first class. I said, I make you a sergeant. You never did become, but anyway, he says, all right, so he went up there behind the tank that his squad was behind, and the Germans fired on the tank, and the tank backed up real fast and buried him in the mud.
Oh.
And so it was 16 days of mud, and so he down, and I put him in as killed in action. So that's the way it was turned in. In October, the war, as I could hear them removing the bodies and all that, and when they came up, he says, and I could hear them say, well, leave that, he's done for, leave it alone. He said, as soon as I heard that, I started moving, and he said, so they dug me out. Spent 6 months in the hospital, and here I am. So he was there that night to introduce me to the gal that became my wife.
No.
Yes, he introduced me to the girl that became my wife. And he says, I'm here to invite you on a blind date. And I said, if that ever, and that had to be a sign.
Oh, yes.
It had to be. It absolutely couldn't have been no other way. It's just a sign.
Do you have an approximate number of how many men died with you when you were over there?
Yeah, we had of my men that died. Probably of the 48 that I had, probably about 10, because we were always moving. Actually, in my regiment, 2,000 men.
A little bit about your wife and kids.
Well, what I did is my wife, she is 1 and 2 years old, and her husband had deserted her, and she was in the divorce proceeding. And so I helped her get the divorce through a guy that was adjutant in the VA, and after the war, he was a friend of mine during the war, and so he helped to get a lawyer, get a judge to pass, was reelected. You know, when he took over from FDR, when he was supposed to lose to Dewey, the day he won, my son was born. And the day and my son was born that day, and my company commander was buried in St. Louis that day. Captain Barra, who was Yogi Berra's cousin. Yeah, he was buried in St. Louis that day. But yeah, those are all. And my wife, she really went along with just about anything I would do. We had 23 houses we lived in different places. The company would send me here, there, and there to solve. I was like a problem solver in the lumber industry, and I go and solve problems. Or Pier 1 in Los Angeles had a real problem, and I went there to solve that one, and then we had some other problems that in different places, in Warner Hardware in Minneapolis and so forth, and so I didn't have a high school education, but I learned a lot in the orphan home, and I learned a lot from the chairman of the board of Lone Star, Jim Stewart. You always listen to the other guy first. You let him say what he's got to say, because then you know where you're going to come from. Let him talk first, and that's a pretty good saying, and I have adopted that, and
my wife, what she did is after I was working so many hours, she took a job didn't take a job, she took a course at Miami University in Miami, Florida. But we used to get into it because the different jobs I had in the country, I've always had a secretary. And like when I had a secretary in Los Angeles, the secretaries would say, "You're supposed to take us out every day." And I says, "I'm not from that group, I don't do that." I says, "Now if you want to go in a group sometime, I'll join the group, but I will not take you out by yourself." And so I had 3 of them quit me in Los Angeles because I couldn't go with them. And but I was in the 32nd floor of the Equitable Building in St. Diana Loach, who's wrote the book on guns, and she's in Glenn Beck's. I was on Glenn Beck's program in the Dallas Blazers, what would they call it? I forgot what they call it. And I sat with Colin Powell and his wife, and Chuck Dowd, and of course I talked with and the woman that's in charge of the Pentagon, the reporter at the Pentagon, and she asked me to stop putting her on email because I was putting some stuff that was anti-government. she said people were beginning to hit me on that. She said, "Please." So I had to stop that. But
The end of the war story, you must have learned more and more about leadership. What would you tell me? What is the takeaway? What have you learned about all these years about leadership?
Well, the main thing I learned, and I tell the kids this too in school too, I tell them that the very first thing you got to learn is care. Kids
Well, that's good.
Yeah, and I go to the ROTC classes and talk to the ROTC people too, and I tell the girls, I said, you want to know, if you're over 15 years old, I'll tell you exactly what I think. You don't belong in the service. You belong in raising the patriots. That's what you belong. No girl is allowed, as far as I'm concerned, giving their kids to their grandparents and say, "Take care of them, I'm joining the Army." I said, "No, you're joining the Army because you want to be around some men, and you're causing them trouble because they worry about you and they don't worry about what else is going on."
Do you ever get called a sexist? A sexist?
No, I'm sure I've been called all kinds of things, but not to my face. I haven't. But, no, yeah, it's I send notices to the newspaper all the time. Every day when I get the newspaper, if I see something in there that I don't agree with, I don't write a letter. I write right on the article, "Despicable," and I give the reason, and then I put my name and phone number. And I noticed there's been a few changes, but I've been sending those packets in there about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
I save them for a week and then I send them in. And it's just like this guy that Horowitz, that reporter.
Public speaking.
1996, about 1996, we started going to schools and all that. And I've been to I've been to the Tulsa University, Oklahoma University, Wesleyan University. I've been to the Air Force, Tinker Field, and Will Rogers Field, and I've been to.
To speak at West Point.
Oh yes, I've been to West Point. Yeah, I was at I spoke at West Point, and I was there. I gave 2 talks at West Point, and I Oh, and I've given the Reserve Officers Association here, I have talked to them a few times. And I've told them some things they didn't know about West Point and so forth, and they went and checked on it afterwards, and they said, "You tell the truth." That is exactly what they're doing. And about the women teachers at West Point and things like that. And today it's worse than it ever was, because now they say there's 25
of this interview today. I've got a couple of questions that I really want your honest opinion on,
Yeah,
and
okay.
what your thoughts are. What does the American flag mean to you?
Well, I don't know exactly how to explain that, because it's always mean so much to me from the time I was a little kid, and because of World War I, my father and Uncle both being in it and so forth. And, so from the time I was growing up, it's always meant everything to me. And there's only one thing I put in front of it, and that's God. And I have a thing that I wrote up about every constitution of a state in the United States, in their constitution, has God mentioned in it. Every one of them. And if you atheists wants to kill it, you're going to have to start with every state in the United States and attack or sue them one at a time, every state. And let's see if the people will put up for it. I would hope they wouldn't, but I don't know about the people today.
Yeah, I know.
I told a bunch of veterans not long ago, just the other day, I said, "You're wimps." And they said, "Why?" I said, "You're sitting here and I'm sitting in a meeting and you're telling me all the things that are wrong. And I'm looking at you and say, what the hell are you doing about it? What are you doing about it?" And I said, "In fact, I'll write the letters for you, and if you agree with them, you sign them." Because they won't, they know who I am, because I'm afraid of hell all the time. And going to the monument in Washington, D.C., I won't go near it. 7 times they've been after me to go to the monument in Washington, D.C.
The World War II memorial.
And I says, "All right, convince me, give me the $50, you know." And on it says, you open the book and right on the inside it says, "Printed in China."
Oh,
Okay, all right, printed in China. Right next to it is a letter from Bob Dole, who supported that. At the end, he mentions God, but he didn't see that got into the monument, and he was a sponsor of the monument, Bob Dole. I wrote him a letter, he never answered me. I'm ashamed of you for what you did. You didn't do it. You never followed what the deal was, and you never mentioned it. And there was nothing more important in the whole war than the Normandy invasion as far as involvement, and that was concerned. And you never printed one thing from Eisenhower or FDR, and they both wrote letters on that day, both of them. And I said, "You never mentioned it, never did anything." And then you're telling me 7 times they've been after me now, and they said, "You're the only one we know of in Tulsa area that won't go to it." And I says, "Good luck, I'm glad I am the only one." They used to invite me to every one that they did the night before so I could meet with the guys, that they could try to talk me into it.
yeah.
And I said, "Every one of you, if you'd say tonight, I will not go tomorrow morning, it's going to be empty." I said, "They'll think, wait a minute, we maybe are doing something wrong."
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I could preach about that one. I do.
Well, Paul, another thing I'd like to ask you is, what is your definition of a hero?
Well, I would say a hero would be a guy that wants to do something for his country, and he does do it for his country. And the whole story is you have to want to do something in order to do it. And I will never. I see these guys that they'll change their opinion of something just to satisfy somebody. I am not gonna do that. I'm one way and that's the way it is. And you like it or you don't like it, you know, but
You're not too hip on political correctness.
no, no. And this nationalist stuff that goes out is ridiculous. What he meant by nationalist is a guy that puts his country first.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what we should do. We should work with all nations, but you put your country first. That's what you pledge allegiance to, the
Yes.
United States of America.
Yes.
You didn't pledge your allegiance to the world, you pledged it to the United States of America. That's what makes you a nationalist. And they're turning around that a nationalist is a what do you call it, a racist?
Yeah.
He's this, he's that, he's all of that, and they don't go to the truth.
Yeah.
They don't go to the truth.
Yeah.
So, amen.
Paul, what would you tell me today about your life that you have never talked about in your thousands of speeches and talks? What would you share with me today? Something that you've just never shared with anybody else.
Well, there's probably a lot of things, but I've been pretty open about most things, excepting some of the things I told you about the whorehouse and things like that. But
And the donkey?
huh?
And the donkey?
Yeah. And I no, I do believe this. But I'd say it. I agree. There's good on both sides, and you have to be a good listener and find out where the people are coming from before you jump. And so many people jump before it's time to jump.
Mhm.
And I get so disturbed about people who think that this is a new culture and all that. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. There's been different things in life, but it's all, God put it there for a reason to develop and develop us to where we be somebody.
Mhm.
And someday that they'll have to go back, I think, and start to reason things out. There may be a reasoning now. There might be, if Trump don't get shot. There might be a reason that they could deal in some things. There's a few areas that we could see whether they'll do anything about, and other than starting all new investigations, of course, they could just tear everything apart, or they could build.
Mhm.
They could do one or the other, and it hurts. It hurts to think of the country, and sometimes I sit there and I have to say the Lord's Prayer over and over again just to get myself off of that deal. And the pastor, one of the pastors was here yesterday, and he says, if you can't do anything else, say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I said, boy, do I do that. But yeah, but they're taking God out of everything, and it's so disgraceful that they're doing that. And like a person could stand there and tell all kinds of lies, and yet they'll support the liar. And and I tell them where I think they're lying, and in fact I challenge them to come back at me, because I give them my phone number and my name. I give it to them every time I challenge them. I give them my name and phone number, and so I think that that's what you need to do is let them know, if you want to let them know where you stand, tell them who you are. Don't stand in the background
Yeah.
and just say something and then don't back it up. No, you can't do that. But no, the one thing that I could say is there's probably so many of them that I don't know what I could. I think back on a lot of things, and thing I'm proud of is that I was a one woman man. I was married 67 years. My wife, she objected a lot of times because I had to have secretaries. And once in a while, she'd sit there and get in a bad mood, and she'd
Sure.
say, you messed up here, you messed up there, you went with this girl, that girl. And the way I always cured it, I walked over to her, and she's sitting on a chair. And I said, God is right there. And may he strike me dead on this spot if I have done everything to defame you or go against you or do anything with another woman since I met you. And she'd say, watch out, watch out. And I'd laugh. Then she'd laugh about it, but I'd get her on that because she knew what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I'd go back, I said, let's leave these up there and I'm right here. May he strike me dead right now. And so that, you know, you get proud of that. You can
Yeah.
say, what the hell, you know. And I love women, and I know what they went through. They had the babies for us to educate them, to grow them up to be somebody, and we have to live with it, and we must live with it, and it's true. And the only objection I have to too many women in government is they think too long, and men act quicker than women.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't have a woman that in a particular spot that would procrastinate too long before she acted.
Mm-hmm.
That you can act and then correct it if you've made a mistake, but some of them, well, we got some of them out there. I think Feidenstein really made a mess of that investigation of what's called, and I believe it'll come out eventually that she knew more than she has let on that she knew.
Mm-hmm.
But she wants more investigations of Kavanaugh than she
Oh,
does
oh,
herself.
sure.
Yeah, and
Well, Paul, I just want to thank you for all the time that you've spent with us today. And my brother, you know, my son and I were having a discussion on the way up here. And he looked at me and he said, Dad, you've lived a lot of life.
yeah.
Paul, you've lived a lot of life.
Yeah, well, it's been, you know, it's been 70 years since the war, and I've had I could actually go in there and write a book about the Veterans Hospital deal, about the aeronautical chart plant deal, about the communist investigations. I could write books on all of that, but it's just so much of it that I can't. One other thing, and I'm going to cut it off. What we did is, when I at one time I worked in the World War I section when I was with the War Department after the war for a little while, and my Uncle Tom's record was there and my dad's record, but they took my dad's record out, but they forgot to take my Uncle Tom's record out. And so he was talking to me one day, and I says, I know a lot about you that you don't know. And he says, well, what, Dad? I says, you had scabies real bad. And he says, well, for the same deal, we went dirty for so long that we got scabs all over us. And we had to wear gloves and have trigger finger open and have scabs all over our body and all that stuff. He got tickled at that. He says they should have taken my record out of there too, so you didn't know that. And I said I knew that, but anyway,
Well, Paul, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say, but just thank you, and because of you, I'm better. I feel better about my service. I feel better about, what I did in the Army.
There's so much you could do. And if you haven't written a book, you're way late. You're way late.
I'm working on one.
You got to do it. And I tell these guys, all of you have a story to tell.
Yes.
And if
yes.
you just write it down, and I said, and if you can't do anything with it, give it to me. And I'll get it printed for you and give it back to you, and you'll see that you are worth something.
Yes.
You're telling people what they did, what you did wrong, or what you did right,
Yep.
and what life meant to you. And and it'll tell you something that you didn't know about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down.
Yep.
And I tell these guys that all the time, and most of them don't. They figure, oh, it's too much trouble to write a letter. But
Well, you know what got me starting writing my book is I got a microphone, and there's a program for my computer that when I talk into the microphone, it types every single word I say.
oh well, I don't have that.
It's like a dictation thing.
Oh yeah, well my niece would know about that. And let's see, there was let me see, just before we shut it off. Then let me. We got turn around here. You probably never got this book. One of the schools asked me to write this book.
The 24 times I almost got it that
Yeah,
I
I
know
did.
of.
Is that what it says?
Let me sign it here. Yeah, the Jenks High School asked me to write that, and so it's all stuff that's in the other book, but it kind of breaks it down.
Sure. How many books do you have out now, Paul?
I got it's 6 books out, but I got 3 more being worked on.
Okay.
And did I give you a leadership book?
No.
Okay, well you need to have that one, because this one tells you a lot about why we did things we did that maybe have been contrary to what
Mm-hmm.
we were taught. But there, that is. Let's see if I. I don't know if you got an extra copy of this. I'll give you one of those so you have an extra copy of the. Because I have it in here.
I don't think I've seen this one either.
Well, that's the main book. I
The
guess.
one I got is the one about the prayer, about God.
About the what?
God, about,
Oh, God, family, duty, out
Yeah,
of country.
yeah.
Oh yeah, that was put together. I just put that together, and I thought people need to know how Washington D.C. was formed, and the cross, and
oh yes.
all that, and what's on the top of the Washington Monument, and about the stairways on the Washington Monument. A lot of people don't know that.
No, they don't teach that stuff anymore.
No, they don't. Oh, they don't teach it. You're right.
Yeah.
There's a few schools that do here. The Patriot School, and in the Union District, and Jenks High School, and Memorial. They have a colonel out there now. That's ROTC, and they kind of go with that. Pretty good. And so I appreciate that they do that. And but yeah, it's the way it is, and we just keep doing it.
Well, Paul, until the next time, I just want to tell you, buddy, God bless you, and thank you so much
You're welcome.
for what you've done for us.
Yeah. Well, you got a lot to go.
Yep.
You're a young man yet. How old are you now?
70.
70. Well, see, you got 26 years to catch up with me.
I know.
So